All eyes are on Tehran and Washington. What began as a standoff between Israel and Iran is now spiraling into a flashpoint that could drag the United States into direct conflict. The big question isn't if the US will join, but when and how. At the heart of the escalation lies a barrage of military assets streaming toward the region. On June 16th, the USS Nimitz, the US Navy's oldest nuclear supercarrier, abruptly changed course, abandoning a planned visit to Vietnam and began heading west across the Indian Ocean toward the Arabian Sea. Normally a routine rotation to replace the USS Carl Vinson, this redeployment came with newfound urgency. Exchange of missile strikes between Iran and Israel spurred the move forward. Within days, the US had 3 carrier strike groups near the Middle East: the Carl Vinson, already in the Gulf of Aden, the Nimitz en route from the South China Sea, and now the newest and most advanced supercarrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, headed toward the Mediterranean. 3 carriers in one region hasn't happened often, and it signals more than just deterrence. It demonstrates readiness to engage if necessary. But the naval buildup isn't alone. According to flight tracking data, about 30 aerial refueling tankers, including KC-135 Stratotankers and KC-46 Pegasus aircraft, were launched from U.S. bases and repositioned across Europe in the last week. A squadron of F-22S and F-35S was spotted trailing these tankers toward the Middle East, a clear sign they're being staged for possible missions beyond defensive airspace coverage. Pentagon officials confirmed this buildup is about enhancing the defensive posture and ensuring options to strike or defend, not just reassurance. That hedge, deploying both offensive and defensive assets, is classic preparation for worst-case escalation. On the ground and at sea, U.S. destroyers like the USS Thomas Hudner, USS Arleigh Burke, and USS The Sullivans are already operating in the eastern Mediterranean. They've shot down Iranian ballistic missiles aimed at Israel, proving active involvement is underway. Add to this the deployment of surface-to-air missile systems, Patriot batteries and THAAD, to bolster Israel's defenses, plus the rerouting of roughly 20,000 anti-drone missiles initially bound for Ukraine toward the Middle East. All signs point to a theater rapidly gearing up for U.S. action. Meanwhile, at the strategic and political level, U.S. President Donald Trump has renewed warnings for Iranians to evacuate Tehran immediately, underscoring the gravity of what's being considered. Intelligence leaks suggest Israel may target Iran's underground uranium enrichment sites at Fordow or Natanz, facilities buried hundreds of feet underground and out of reach for conventional bombs. The U.S. military possessed GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs and B-2 stealth bombers, both reportedly being staged in the region. Locally, Iran isn't passive. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has threatened irreparable damage if the U.S. intervenes. Proxy militias, cyber cells, and sleeper operatives lurk across the Middle East, and possibly Europe and the U.S. ready to retaliate. So the conflict isn't siloed, it's a powder keg. On June 18th, the so-called Doomsday Plane, E-4B Nightwatch, the U.S. military's airborne command center, landed near Joint Base Andrews. Its deployment, timed with Trump's departure from the G7 summit, hints at crisis-level preparation. From Washington, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth emphasized that protecting U.S. forces is the priority, framing the deployments as defensive. But that stance doesn't stop them from being capable of facilitating offensive strikes. What does all this add up to? Let's break it down. U.S. military capabilities near Iran. 3 carrier strike groups: Nimitz, Carl Vinson, Gerald Ford, housing 60-90 FA-18S, F-35S, EA-18G Growlers, E-2 Hawkeyes, plus submarines and guided missile destroyers. 30-plus aerial refueling tankers enabling long-range bombers and jets to maintain patrol and strike capability. Strategic bombers like the B-2 Spirit on standby, capable of delivering bunker-busting GBU-57S against Iran's subterranean nuclear facilities. Active defenses, destroyers intercepting missiles, plus Patriot and THAAD systems deployed for Israel's defense. Rapid deployment of the E-4B Nightwatch signals readiness for top-level crisis management. Diplomatic moves, U.S. evacuating embassy staff, banning travel to Iran, urging Tehran's residents to get out now. Trump's blunt messaging: evacuate Tehran, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's not deterrence, it's warning. Khamenei's threat of irreparable damage shows Iran is preparing for worst-case outcomes. Iran's nuclear program continues unabated, Enrichment up 50% since February, heading closer to fissile material. Proxy groups and irregular warfare tactics raise the risk of broader regional instability if the U.S. intervenes. Israel struck Iran's facilities first on June 13th, killing key military and nuclear leaders. That strike pushed the U.S. from posture to preparation, with the carriers, tankers, bombers, and command planes streaming in. Diplomacy has failed. Iran refuses to pause enrichment, and Israel can't reach deeply buried sites without U.S. support. The U.S. has the bunker busters and aerial platforms to finish the job if diplomacy collapses. What comes next? 4 possible scenarios. A. U.S. stays defensive, using its assets to intercept Iranian missiles and support Israel diplomatically, but not launching its own strike. Tensions could plateau without U.S. casualties. B. U.S. conducts precision strikes, using F-A-18S, F-35S, or B-2S to attack Iran's nuclear sites, but steering clear of broad conflict. This would carry enormous risks, but could end enrichment efforts. C. Full-grade war, direct clashes between U.S. forces and Iran, with missiles, drones, naval skirmishes, and covert ops. That risks drawing in Russia, China, Hezbollah, and others. D. Negotiated de-escalation, back-channel diplomacy involving Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Europe, and the U.S. to freeze nuclear activities and halt strikes. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called for such diplomacy on June 16th, laying responsibility on Trump to restrain Israel. But the question remains, is time still on the clock, or did the countdown end with the arrival of the E-4B at Andrews Air Force Base? Here's what to watch in the coming 48-72 hours. Movement of B-2S from Whiteman AFB to Diego Garcia or Azores. Journaled use of refueling lanes above Middle East airspace, indicating continuous flight operations. Satellite tracking of the GBU-57 bombs and bomber tasking. Any deviations in patrol patterns of destroyers, increased missile intercepts, or overt warnings to Iran. This is no longer a forecast. It's very real, and the world is watching. The U.S. has taken its biggest precautionary steps since the Iraq invasion. Whether it proceeds down the same path, history will judge. Stay locked in. Hit subscribe for real-time updates as this crisis unfolds.